What's up, guys? It's Seth Trischler here with Jack Sheridan. We got another good one here. It's the one we've been talking about for a while. Finally reveal who it is, and it's elder grad Bill Hemmer. So should be a good one, and we'll get right into it.
All right.
Jack, you want to get started?
Yeah, so I think the first question we kind of wanted to ask was, so we've both heard the stories about when you and a friend used to go up in the tower and play music before school. And, you know, obviously that was in the 80s. And then now, like, the technology is, like rapidly, I guess, kind of increased. Like, we got our own podcast studio and ENN studio now. So we're just kind of wondering, like, how did you and your friend kind of come up with that idea, and like how did you make it work back then?
It's a good question. I can't recall precisely how the idea came about. I don't know if we had been running around up there one day or something, but we pitched the idea and they went for it, but it only lasted a couple of weeks. I think what it did for me is that it gave me an idea about what I wanted to pursue in college. And I felt when I was growing up that there was a lot of pressure to find, well, what do you want to do when you grow up? And I found that always a challenging question for me. I think a lot of my peers as well. Some people probably had it nailed down, but I did not. But that was a light bulb that went off, and I thought, well, this is something I could pursue and probably be interested in. I think what you said about ENN though is it's really important. I'm a big supporter of it. I think it's a great asset for you guys. I think it has the potential to be an amazing asset for the entire school, and in turn a really strong and certifiable assets for communicating with the alumni base, which I see as critical in order to keep Elder strong for decades to come. That's where you raise money. That's how you make your facilities better. Sorry about the ding in there. I can't turn it off. You guys know how, tell me. But there will be emails that come in throughout our conversation here. So I really believe that just the foundation that was laid at ENN in the last couple of years is really good. I think it's going to pay off in a significant way down the line.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. Sorry, Seth. Like what you said about like communicating with the alumni base, because like with the 100th anniversary coming up, the board's kind of using ENN now, like with their Panther pauses. I don't know if you've heard about those.
Kind of like, I have, yeah.
Yeah, they're kind of using them, and like their plan, like for the next school years, is kind of like broadcasting online to kind of like get people like alumni from like across the country, or like even some that live in different parts of the world.
Yeah. I would just add on that, Jack, that I think that, not all the alums, but 80% of them are probably on Instagram, right? Or Facebook, or both, or Twitter. Just take those assets that already exist and know that they're populated with people of similar mind. And, whether they're 20 or 30 or 40 or 70, people like to see what's going on back home. I'm one of them. So that's a good example.
So Purple Friday is a pretty big thing, and often viewers see you repping a purple tie. I sort of want to know where that originated.
Yeah, that's a good one. Can't remember, but you guys don't wear ties, do you?
Not anymore.
Yeah, at all.
I think this year they just got rid away for masses not having to wear ties. So
yeah, that was like the last time we had to wear them.
Seth and Jack, between the two of you, how many ties do you own?
I think maybe 3 or 4.
Yeah, I'd say about the same.
Combined?
Yeah.
All right, well, I hope one is purple. I years ago I started doing it, and I guess at first it was subliminal, and then kind of the word got out. But I find that, I was at CNN for 10 years. I've been at Fox for 15, 16 years now. And I think the viewership of Fox in Southwest Ohio is exceedingly high. And you'd be very surprised how many people from St. X and Muller will tweet at me when they see me wearing a purple tie. Yeah, so it's not just the elder community, it's the word has gone out to others. John Boehner was the Speaker of the House for several years in Washington, D.C., and he played football at Muller. And he and I struck up a friendship together. So we would do events, and he'd wear a gold tie, and I'd wear a purple one, or he'd give me a purple tie, and that was cool. And the fact that people pay attention to it is cool as well. Can't remember what the incentive was, other than to say it was a way for me to keep in touch with the folks back home, and probably a now what is considered a less than subliminal way.
So I kind of wanted to go back to what you said earlier when we were talking about the like the broadcast that you and your friend did, and how it kind of gave you an idea of what you wanted to do in college. So I read online, like, I don't know how accurate it is, but when you were in college, you studied in Luxembourg for a little bit. Did like studying abroad for like an extended period of time, I'm guessing, did that kind of prepare you or give you an idea that like you wanted to be a journalist?
Great question. How about I answer that? I guess when I was your age, I knew two things. You know, I knew sports and music, and so I was trying to find a way to get involved in one or both. And I think it's kind of how the idea came about for playing music before school, and then went off to Miami. I had a German teacher. I was the one who signed up for a German class 5 days a week at 8 a.m. Right? That's not what you do in college. Everybody's sleeping in except for me. But that teacher had a great influence on me. His name is Dieter Streunig, and he lived in Oxford. He's from Germany. And what Dieter, it was a 60-minute class. So we would speak German for the first 5 minutes. And then for the next 55 minutes, he would give us his philosophy on the world, and specifically how he felt about America, American policy, and Americans themselves. And maybe you wanted that or not, but he really put he made a strong impact on me about the importance of studying overseas to expand your world. And that's where the idea started. And then when you get there, and at the time, Miami had, I believe, the only university in the entire country of Luxembourg. Now it's not a big country. I think it's the size of Butler County, literally. And I tell you guys, I think the moment we went to Our Lady of Victory Mass that morning. It was a Sunday morning. That we got a big family, right? 7 Hemmers. We all load up into the car and we go to the airport, and they said goodbye. And I was just floating on air. I was like, wow, this is going to be great. I can't wait to get there. And once those wheels touched down in Luxembourg City, I just thought, wow, this is going to be a great 6 months. What did it do? I think what it does, obviously, is that it just opens your mind to cultures and history that has greater texture to you in your life, because you're able to literally walk through it. I can't give it a higher recommendation. I think it's essential, whether it's London or whether it's Madrid or whether it's Luxembourg or whether it's Shanghai, wherever it is, take a chunk of your life, whether it's 4 months or 6 months or a year even, and have that experience, and come back with that knowledge and see what it does to your brain, see what it does to your mind, see what interests you start to gravitate toward. For me, what it did is that it opened my mind to a lot of other places. And when I went back to Oxford, I got a job working at Channel 5 as a senior. I got kind of lucky, making $9,000 a year as a weekend sports producer. But bam, I got a job. I did graduate on time, but I was always going back to the newspaper. We had newspapers then. I was reading these clips and blurbs about stories from overseas. And then now this is the late 80s now, right? So remember, it's the Soviet Union. And it's the United States of America. It's Mikhail Gorbachev, and it's Ronald Reagan. It's the Cold War. It's the potential for nuclear war. all that was on the line. And I know this might be hard to grasp for a lot of people now, but I mean, look what's happening in Ukraine right now with Putin and nuclear weapons on all sides. You start to get a sense of kind of what we were going through as a country and as a people then. And no one was quite sure how this was going to work out. But the world was in two camps. And there was a Democratic side and there was a communist side. And which way were you going to choose? The wall came down in the fall of 1989, but all those events there were just captured for me in that time that I spent in Europe, and was able to go to places like East Berlin, et cetera, and Moscow and Leningrad, which is now St. Petersburg, and on it goes. What that did for me is it forced me to explore other parts of the world. And what I did with that job 6 years later is I took the $15,000 I was able to save on a salary like that, and I quit the job and I backpacked around the world for a year. And at the time, I know this sounds like ancient history to a lot of people, but believe me, fellas, time goes fast. You'll be shocked. I mean, think about how quickly your time has gone by at Elder. But it's flown by, hasn't it? Well, time doesn't slow down. The same thing's going to happen for you guys in college. Same thing's going to happen for your professional life. The same thing's going to happen with your family life. So just get ready for it, because it flies. So you have, in 1992 and 1993, you have a world where you had third world countries, and one of which was China. You guys don't consider China to be a third world country, right? Yeah, right. I mean, it's America's competitor now. So it was China, it was Vietnam, back when they were considered third world, before they went into what was considered the emerging market arena. It was India, it was Nepal, it was the Middle East, it was Eastern Europe, and it was Russia. And I was on the road for a year and just learning as much as I could. And what that did for me ultimately is that enabled me to get a job at CNN. I went down there, had the audition, did well in the audition, because cable news is kind of in my blood a little bit, but it was the resume that got me over the line. They're like, wow, so you've done all this stuff. And, CNN at the time was the only international news network in the world. Well, the BBC, sorry. BBC was out there as well. And so I fit right into what they were looking for. And I had the background and the preparation to go ahead and seal the deal on the job. Why am I telling? The reason I'm laying this out: Elder, Miami, Luxembourg, working in TV in Cincinnati, backpacking around the world, getting a job at CNN. It's hard for people to see this when you're 17, 18, 19 years old. These are all building blocks for the foundation that you will become as a person. So when you ask me the question about overseas education, I cannot say how critical it was to me, and I think it is to everybody who has that experience. Long answer. Sorry. Try and edit that one.
All good. So in your career, you've interviewed a lot of important people. I just want to go, how does that happen, and what's it like after, when you look back on it?
You're right. We talk to a lot of smart people every day. We talk to a lot of people with big ideas every day. I don't think that I am someone who is necessarily inclined to being impressed by a lot. I respect them, but leaving an impression, I think, is a different thing. I'm going to say that with a level of understanding that I don't take their commentary or opinion for granted. But I guess I see people as people, and I don't get wowed so much by what they do. But it might be different if I was sitting across from somebody like Bob Dylan, because he might give me a hard time. But it's one of the aspects of the job that I find challenging. And it's one of the aspects of the job where you find yourself doing a lot of reading to make sure that you've got the background and the research to ask a question that the audience will appreciate. I think therein lies like the secret to how you frame and phrase and ask a question.
Yeah, so I kind of want to go off what Seth asked. So back in, I think it was March or April of 2020, you interviewed former President Trump at the White House. How is like an interview with the president? Is there like a difference in preparation and in terms of, just getting ready for it than just interviewing, I guess, like a senator on your show?
Yeah. Thank you. Great question. A lot of times the segments we do during the week are 3 or 4 minutes. So you're really reading enough to get a handle of questions, 6 maybe at the most, if you even get to 6. But you have to do the reading enough you have to read enough in order to know that if they give you an answer you don't expect, or if you're going to pivot and go somewhere, if they say something, you better be prepared for it. That's why you do the research. I think with regard to a US president, yes, that's times 10, I would say. That's 10x. That particular moment within President Trump, we were still in the very early days of COVID, and no one was quite sure what it was or what it would become or not. So there was a lot of mystery in the air. And I thought we were smart about it in order to include doctors who study it for a living, in order for them to go ahead and provide questions as well. I thought that was a smart thing. With regard to Trump as a person, as a subject in terms of an interview, listen, the hardest interviews are when people give you 3-word answers. Trump, he's not like that. You find yourself, it really becomes a rolling conversation. And I find that some people are hard to interrupt. He's not one of them. And I think he showed that of a lot of his press conferences too. It was like, next, next, next. And he just roll with the answers and go to the next question. But I thought that was an opportunity for us to find out, what we're in for. And I think some of the answers looking back, I mean, we know that a lot of it, I think, was wishful thinking, not from the advantage of being short-sighted, but they were trying to be optimistic at the time. And we all found out what happened, right? We were with it a year later.
So we've been talking about a lot of aspects of your job. What is some advice you could give like younger students, like if they're trying to get into your field of work?
Yeah. I kind of give the same answer a lot of times. You want to ask 1,000 questions. You want to play well with others, and you always want to be available. And I think that's true for our line of work. I think it's probably true for just about anything you choose or select to do in your life. Ask a lot of questions, be curious. You're not quite sure where those questions are going to lead, where the answers are going to take you, but it's going to enhance your understanding for sure. Play well with others. I mean, you guys are required to do that every day in class or at school at Elder, or even in your family life with your brothers and sisters and your mom and dad. Employers, I think, look for that. Are you a team player? Or are you going to be a pain? And the whole idea about always being available is when the job requires people upon whom they rely, they want to know that you're going to be there for them when they ask you to pick up slack. It happens in our job all the time. Extra shifts, extra shows, working nights, working mornings, working weekends, coming back from vacations, giving vacations up. And can they rely on you to say yes? It's a hard thing. I mean, you'll find out, you got a wife and you got kids at home and they're young, you want to be with them. And I understand the pull on that. You'll be lucky to find an employer who understands it also. And I think at Fox, they do. And I'm very blessed in that respect. If I've got something where I'm like, man, I can get there tomorrow, they'll be understanding of that. But if you keep those 3 tenets in mind, I'd highly recommend that. I think the other thing, Seth, is that you guys are seniors.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Here's what I think. Some of this is going to make sense. Maybe it doesn't. But remember at the beginning of our conversation, I was playing records right from the tower at Elder, and I thought, wow, I enjoy this. Music, DJ. I'll go to school and I'll become a disc jockey. I mean, that was the depth of my thinking then. Nothing against disc jockeys, but if you pick a path, doesn't matter if you're on the right track or not. If you choose a path, you can always deviate. You can always change your mind. You can go right, you can go left, or you can pursue the original idea. But what it's going to do, it will put you over the next several years ahead of your peers who are also pursuing a similar idea. So in my case, toward the end of my college years, I knew what I was going to do. And a lot of my classmates are still trying to figure it out. So if you're able to just pick a path and go for it, I think you're going to find yourself better off.
Sorry, I don't mean to be kind of jumping subjects on these questions here, but so I kind of wanted to ask this question because I really want to know the answer to this. So you've reported at a lot of historical events. You were at Ground Zero after 9/11. You were at the Boston bombing. You went to the DMZ when Trump met with Kim Jong-un there. How is kind of reporting from these events, kind of while they're unfolding, different from reporting, like while you're there in person and they're unfolding? How is that different than reporting from them in a newsroom?
Great question. Look, here, we talk to people. That's great. We read a lot. That's great. But when you're on location and you're talking to people face to face, there's no greater ability to understand a story or a concept or an idea or what you're covering than doing that in person. It's invaluable. I have been to the DMZ, but I was not there when Trump met Kim Jong-un. But I've had the great fortune of seeing history unfold on behalf of millions and millions of people before my very eyes, and I would not trade it for anything. It's part of the reason why I got into this profession. But if you are on the scene, what is it? Is it a tornado? Is it a hurricane? Is it a political event? Is it some sort of, is it a terrorist attack? Is it a war? We hope to go down to the border in the coming month. Your understanding is multiplied numerous times when you are face to face talking to people. You and I, right, we're in these boxes right now. That's fine. That's great. But if we were sitting next to each other, you would be able to see 50% of the communication in life is nonverbal. You could see me make an emotion, or I could see you make an emotion, and maybe you want to interrupt me or redirect something, or do a follow-up question. Well, you can't do that when you're talking to people in boxes. You can do that when you're in person. And I think that there's great value in that.
So we're talking about your journey to your profession, and so I want to sort of know, what was your reaction when you took Shepard Smith's slot?
Yeah, he is a longtime colleague, and I think he does a terrific job. I think it was a job that I really liked working where I was. But they wanted to make a move there, and that's fine. I think if you were to go back 2 questions prior, maybe add another aspect of the 3 things I said, and that's flexibility. If you can stay flexible in your job, you're going to show that you have, greater latitude, and just, if you have to pivot, I think the people sometimes are probably most successful in this occupation are people who can do a lot of different things. And that means, can you anchor? Can you go from the field live? Can you talk for hours without a teleprompter? Can you do an interview? Can you ask succinct questions? Can you comprehend a lot of things at one time? Can you listen to producers in your ear? Do you have all those skills? Can you get along with others? Can you work with this person, that person? And what you find is that you become a utility person of sorts. And the cable game is kind of like that. And if you look at a lot of different people who are successful, I think over time, you see them in a lot of different slots and a lot of different positions. So that was a position that that we moved to right at the end of January of 2020, and here comes COVID. Well, COVID changed everything, didn't it? And I thought the job was fine. It was midday. My opinion, however, in all honesty, is I do a morning show at 9 o'clock. It's late morning hours for the Eastern time zone. It's 6 a.m. on the West Coast, which is essentially their morning hours. I always think that being an anchor who is still able to go out in the field and cover stories, you're not always going to be assigned, as a reporter or correspondent, you're not always going to find a story that's a front page magnitude. But as an anchor, you will, because you will have a voice in whatever story is prominent for that day. And that's why I think that morning slot is so important. You set the tone for the news diet that carries you throughout the rest of the day. And I don't know, I've always kind of coveted that spot. You're up at 4:45 in the morning, but you give a little here and you take a little there. So that's how I see it.
So on election nights, when you're usually on the map, kind of breaking down the different voting trends between like states or counties, how do you memorize, like, so say one county voted this way one year and then the next year they voted for this candidate? How do you kind of like memorize all that stuff?
Yeah, I wish I could say it was all upstairs in my brain, but some of it's on the map. Some of it may be something I looked up right before I came on TV. That's always possible. And some of it's just basic memory and recollection. You hear those sirens? We're all good here. The job rewards the mind where events are cumulative. So what do I mean by that? You build a foundation for knowledge on a particular story, and you establish that baseline, and you add to it over time because the story is always changing. And elections are like that. And now that I've done them for many cycles, starting in 2004, 2008, 2012, 16, 2020, and coming up in 2024, we've also had midterms in between that hit every 2 years in those off-year elections. So the knowledge, even on that board, is cumulative, and you will remember and hold on to what the district or the county or the state used to do, or what the district or the county used to look like. So I think it kind of builds on itself. And also the keen observer will be able to see there's some data on that screen that helps you cheat a little bit. I think then it falls back to you to say, well, how are you going to tell this story and make this graphic come alive? You're dealing with millions and millions of votes that come in at one time. How are you going to take the viewer through it? And I think a sense of storytelling really becomes handy then.
Since the start of Russia invading Ukraine, it's sort of been the main thing everyone's just been watching constantly. And you've covered it extensively. Do you think Putin can remain in power after it, or do you think he's going to be forced out eventually?
Yeah, no great clear answer for you on that. My hunch today, a lot of people don't remember, but they've been at war there for 8 years. The invasion of 2014 was never settled. They're still in the southeastern part of that country fighting. I think both sides are getting ready for trench warfare. Not in the sense that it's World War I, with just tanks and rifles. There's advanced weaponry there that enables the Ukrainians to hold off the Russian military. And Putin's army did not experience that 8 years ago, and they are now. My concern would be that NATO and the US is only helping Ukraine to fight to a draw and not to help fight and push them back over the border. I don't know why that is. There's two things going on here. You guys may be aware of this, you may not, and that is what's happening with Putin in Ukraine and what's happening with the Iran nuclear deal. And I don't think they can be separated. I think just like the Obama team wanted this nuclear deal done and Trump unwound it when he was president, the Biden team wants to get back into it. So while this war is happening over here, there are negotiations on Iran nuclear deal in Vienna, Austria. And the United States is not even inside that room. The Russians are. They're leading these negotiations. And the reason I bring that up is because we're guessing a lot as to what's happening behind closed doors. I don't want to be a cynic about this or a skeptic about this, but I just wonder what demands Russia is making on the US and NATO as it relates to Ukraine and the war. And does our behavior there determine whether or not Putin and Russia stay at the negotiating table with Iran? I don't know what the answer is, but when you do this job for a long time, fellas, you develop your own theories. And sometimes they prove to be accurate and sometimes they don't. But you have two major foreign policy issues right now that are running parallel. And if this administration is trying to go 2 for 2 on both, it's going to be a difficult thing to accomplish. I think the most telling thing was this past week when General Milley, during that hearing, Capitol Hill, he said they're getting ready for a war that will last for years. I think the phrase was a years-long war that he used, and I think he's right about that.
Yeah, earlier when we were talking about when you were studying overseas, and we kind of touched on like back then with the Soviet Union and the threat of nuclear war, we kind of see that now restarting with Russia. With Putin, like sometimes threatening nuclear weapons, do you think that he's serious, or do you think it's him just kind of posturing to the world?
Yeah, I think the one thing that we've learned over the past 50 or 60 years is that nuclear weapons can be a deterrent. And it's largely kept the peace between India and Pakistan after years of fighting in the northern area of Kashmir. It's largely kept this peace between the Soviet Union and the United States, even though we had dust-ups here. I mean, more than dust-ups, Cuban Missile Crisis, early 60s. Reagan was right to try and bankrupt the Soviet Union, and he did successfully. We found out that that entire system was built on smoke and mirrors. I think one of the unfortunate results of this war will show and prove to any dictator who desires to have nuclear weapons that they have now been proven correct, that if they pursue the bomb and if they get the bomb, they will have leverage over their neighbors. And I think there has been, and there is a nuclear arms race that is still to come that will likely be on steroids compared to what we have seen thus far in world history. And I think a lot of countries will see that to their advantage, where they can hold off an opposition, an enemy, and dictate what they want. And I think Putin's well aware of that. I think based on the performance of his military, who knows if his nukes even work. It's probably not a chance that we want to take, but he has used that to his advantage, clearly.
So one effect of this war, and it's been going on for a while, is the gas prices. And I don't know what they are like over by you, but over here they're pretty high for our standards. I was wondering what you thought about that, and like if we could potentially see them ever drop back down.
Yeah, I think it's a big question, Seth. I'm going to try and. The issue of fracking, I think, is indisputably a very successful technology that the United States was able to use to its advantage. In the beginning, there were questions of whether or not we were causing things to happen below the surface of the earth. That would have been unfortunate. And I think over time, the technology proved to be effective. There is a debate as to whether or not we should drill in Alaska. I've been to ANWR. I've been to the Arctic Circle. It's frozen tundra. There's no people. There's very few animals. In 1980, there was I think it was 1980, maybe it was 1981. There was an awful accident off the southern coast of Alaska where oil went everywhere. It was very unfortunate. I think, however, and we built the Alcan pipeline that brought oil down from Alaska, still does. I think what we've done 42 years later, though, is, we've advanced the technology, and I think you have to take advantage of that. I think the previous administration did. I think current administration will not. Climate change is a major priority for them. It seems to be part of every policy they push. Over time, they might be right, but I think at the present moment, in my opinion, you cannot wish to have a certain policy when the capability to achieve that policy is not here. I think you have to live in the year 2022 as opposed to the year 2042. You cannot wish it to be the way you want. I think a lot of the policies right now in this administration are built around that. And I think the effect is clear. When you get rid of drilling in Alaska, when you slap certain permits on additional drilling in federal lands, when you pull yourself out of the Paris Climate Accord, when you stop the Keystone Pipeline, when you make your intentions clear that it happens to have an effect on the industry. And I think that's part A, and part B is the invasion of Ukraine, clearly on behalf of Putin and Russia, what he's doing there. Fracking came up at one of these hearings this week with Big Oil on Capitol Hill, and not to get too technical, but it really was a game changer for the United States. And at the same time, Europe ran scared from it, and Germany got rid of its nuclear power at the same time. And what they did was they built relationships with Russia, and they took the Nord Stream pipeline to the North Sea, and that's how they got their natural gas from Russia. And they were in the process of finishing the second pipeline, Nord Stream 2, and that was cut off recently. And I think the effect of that was to make your reliance upon Russia. Well, why would you do that? Pretty good question now. Why would you get rid of all your nuclear power? I know there are concerns about Chernobyl from 1986, et cetera. You may not like it, but if you can do it successfully, it's a pretty clean source of energy. Absent hydrogen power, something else that might come down the line decades from now. So I think what happened in Ukraine is that Putin scared these European leaders so badly in the first 48 hours of his invasion that Warsaw was like, whoa, we better wake up. And more so with Germany. Olaf Scholz took over power for Angela Merkel after the years that she was in power. And in 48 hours, he essentially reversed a lot of decisions she made. And it was quite significant. Germany's going to spend more money on their military. Same thing for a lot of these other members of NATO. Putin had that effect on all these leaders. You guys are really living in a time that's quite fascinating, because much like I described earlier, some other moments in history, this is one of these pivot points in history where sides are chosen. And I think that's happening right now. We're pushing Russia more towards China, while NATO starts to find its unity yet again. All that's happening in real time.
With everything in Russia going on, invading Ukraine, do you see China trying to make a move on Taiwan anytime soon?
I think it's a great debate, Jack. I think China has its own priorities. I think it's part of the conversation, clearly. I think Taiwan is 33, 35 million people. Don't quote me on that. It might be more. I can't imagine what a conflict like that would look like on an island. We've seen the way that Putin has had total disregard for any images that come out of Ukraine. It's quite stunning. He did the same thing in Syria, did the same thing in Chechnya, a town of Grozny, GRZNY, from the late 1990s. He leveled the place, went to rubble. And I think in parts of Ukraine, the eastern part and the southern part, all these towns are going to be left in rubble themselves. He doesn't care about the property. He cares about the dirt. He cares about the soil that he believes rightfully in his mind belongs to Russia, going back 200 years.
So we're already pretty much 2 years into President Biden's first term. Do you see any clear runners for 2024 already, or do you think he could go back for a second?
I don't know if Joe Biden will choose to run again. He says he will. I'll take him at his word. On the Republican side, I don't know who challenges him. I think there will be many. 7 years ago, in the summer of 2015, we had the first presidential debate on the Republican primary. It was in Cleveland, Ohio. I don't know if you guys remember that or not, but there were so many candidates that we had to do 2 different stages. Martha McCallum and I did the 5 o'clock debate with 7 candidates. And then at 8 o'clock, Brett and then Megan and then Chris Wallace did the slate of 10 candidates. That's where Trump was on the stage for the first time. And the night the world changed, as I say. And I don't know if we'll have 17, but we might. And we'll see who emerges. What you find in these primary races is you see who quickly becomes presidential material. And you see them line up against each other and they face off each other. And you as an American, you can make up your own mind as to whether or not that answer was good or effective. And that answer was not. And you start to see them hone their skills. And the good ones do it very quickly. And then you start to see people emerge to a top tier, which is what happened during 2015, the race for 2016. Who that will be, I don't know. Is it DeSantis in Florida? Is it Pompeo, the former Secretary of State? Could be. I mean, there's just a few names that come to mind. I know a lot of people are going to be running for this. Probably Kristi Noem in South Dakota. Tom Cotton, U.S. Senator, maybe Marco Rubio again. Look, I could go on and on and on, but I don't have a clear answer as to who they will be. But there will be many.
All right. And then, so this is kind of off topic from what we've been talking about for the past, 20 minutes. But so we don't know how often you come back to Cincinnati, but when you do, what are the top 3, top 5 things you have to do every time you come back?
Great question. Well, my parents are 82. I love them and they are great fun. So they're my top priority. After that would be the rest of my family, seeing them or hanging out with as many as I can. And that's a big job because there's a lot of them and they live everywhere. And they're all doing all kinds of things every day, all day. I love the Mount Adams Bar and Grill. And I would say those are my top 3 things that come to mind. And the next time I'm in town, if it's possible, I'd love to come and see you guys in class. I always like to cruise through Elder, whether I'm announced or not. To see just what's happening on campus and what you guys are doing there. And just like we talked about seeing stories firsthand, face to face earlier in this conversation, it's always better to see you guys in face to face as well.
So you just mentioned coming back. So what do you think draws a bunch of Elder grads to just keep coming back?
Yeah, great question. I'm a big fan of Bruce Springsteen. And one time I was backstage at a show in New Jersey at the Giant Stadium. It was 70,000 people. And we're in his dressing room. And he says, these people, they expect a little more. And I was like, of course they do. You're in New Jersey. And I said, why do you think they keep coming back? And his wife had an answer, and Whoopi Goldberg had an answer, and he had an answer. So I'll tell you why they keep coming back. They keep coming back because they want to see if you can make them feel what they once felt at a previous show. I believe that for like any musician or any concert, no matter who your favorite group is, you go back because you had that emotion that you got caught up in, and rightfully so. I think Elder's a big part of that. I think the sense of community. I think the experience you have collectively. Look, I'm a class of 1983 and I'm still in touch with a lot of guys I went to school with. And they're in touch with even more guys than I am because I've been living away from home for 25 years. But that's a big part of it. The sense of community, the experience you shared together and the emotions you felt at that time is all why you continue to stay in touch. And want to know what's happening back at the back at Elder.
All right.
Same.
Well, yeah,
Back
we
at
both
the
appreciate.
intersection of Vincent and Regina.
Yeah, we both appreciate you taking the time to do this. So thank you.
Yeah, you bet. You got, guys, listen, I don't know how you feel about Elder, but I have always held it in the highest standing possible. And I hope you guys feel the same. And I knew it the first day I got out of bed in the morning, my first day of school, my freshman year, thinking I'm in exactly the right place at exactly the right time. And I think you guys are too. So cherish the final few days, the final few months you have as Elder seniors, and good luck to you. Okay.
Thank you.
Have a good one. Yep. Well, there you go, guys. You saw it firsthand. Great interview with Bill Hemmer, and we're gonna try to bust out a couple or at least one more podcast at our time as Elder students. So there you go.
Yep. Thank
See
you guys
next
for watching.